Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's so good to be here. We're sitting in the garden in front of the Circle of the Way temple. The doors to the temple are open and we have a beautiful group of Upaya's residents. So thank you so much for attending tonight and being here. Thank you again to Noah for setting this up. I'd also like to thank Natalie Kalia for her communications and organizing this poetry series, and always my deepest gratitude to Roshi Joan, the founder and the abbot of Upaya. My gratitude for Roshi and her incredible gift of community and Dharma is vast, and it's so amazing that we have this gorgeous place, Upaya, to come to here in Santa Fe. This is the second talk in the poetry series. The first one was given by Natalie Goldberg in April, and the next one will be given by former poet laureate Joan Logie in May. So it's great to be in touch virtually. I do miss seeing the faces of everyone, so I'm sorry we lose that intimacy, but again, I'm so grateful. I had no idea that we would have a crowd, everybody spaced, pretty socially distanced. So the first time I came to Upaya was almost 25 years ago, and it was for a weekend yoga retreat. We had our sessions in the Circle of the Way temple. The teacher included Zen practice along with the asana practice. And it was my first deep interaction with Zen. I felt my body intertwining with the yoga postures and the Zen practice. And since then, Zen has been a constant companion in my life. Roshi Joan has said that the vision of the Circle of the Way is that everything we do is practice. And one continuous practice is how I see the way I work on poems. And this poetry practice lives parallel to all other life practices. Dogen teaches continuous practice is the circle of the way. And like the circle, there is no means to an end. In fact, there is no end and no beginning, yet there is a continuum of cultivation, an aliveness in existence and creation. Did you know that underneath the floorboards of the Circle of the Way temple is a huge rainbow circle painted in brilliant colors, and it's concealed. Tonight I would like to share some of my thoughts with you about poetry and my poetry practice, and read to you a selection of poems from my most recent collection, Not Into the Blossoms and Not Into the Air. The first poem in the book, Birds Eating Cherries from the Very Old Tree, is a short meditation on how something that is not a feeling suddenly turns into one through language and activity. Birds eating cherries from the very old tree. It's amazing to have the sun, and it's just right on the book, like it's perfect. Oh, I need my glasses. Excuse me. Birds eating cherries from the very old tree. I thought I would make a short list of what is not a feeling. Birds are not feelings. Birds eating cherries from the tree are not feelings. This is the best entertainment, I say to myself, watching birds eating cherries. And now I have made a feeling. The robin's beak glistens with the sticky juice. When a cherry comes off a branch, snagged on the sharp point of its beak, the robin flies away with the cherry, perches on a fence post. But the robin cannot eat the cherry if he is holding on to it. So he drops it and goes back to the tree for more. The robin is not a feeling. The deep rust of the robin's breast is not a feeling. But when I recognize the robin as male because of the color of his breast, a feeling about maleness swells from my center, and I shiver. The magpies take big bites out of the cherries, half of one at once. They squawk and scream at the other birds, who ignore them. Listening to bird calls is not a feeling. A very old tree is not a feeling. But when I think of how very old the tree is, a feeling comes. The magpies tug the cherries off the tree, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. They fly back to their nest and pull them apart like prey. Below the nest, piles of cherry pits lie in varying shades of decomposition. A young sparrow flies from the cherry tree, giddy perhaps from all the sweetness, and crashes into my window, breaking its neck. The bird is warm in my hand, and I have made another feeling. So although it's not in the poem, at the end of the fruiting season, it was clear that there had been plenty of fruit for everyone. In a letter to her friend, Elizabeth Holland, Emily Dickinson wrote in May 1866, "Dear sister, after you went, a low wind warbled through the house like a spacious bird, making it high but lonely. When you had gone, the love came. I supposed it would. The supper of the heart is when the guest is gone. Friday I tasted life. It was a vast morsel. A circus passed the house. Still I feel the red in my mind." My book opens with Dickinson's phrase, "Still I feel the red in my mind," as an epigraph, which seems to me a variation of the koan, "Why is the bodhisattva still attached to the blood-red thread?" With the wonder that comes with koans, their story-like encounters, and the wisdom of their teachings, I found in many of my poems a subtle appearance which was, in most instances, unintentional, mysterious, and discovered after the poem was completed. I see now in these poems how the koan guided a turn in the piece. Here is a poem that I think shows what I am talking about. Does not refer directly to the koan, "How will you step from the top of a 100-foot pole," but references it in a way that grapples with the theme of the poem, the occasional terror that comes along with being alive. One more thing I'd like to mention before I read the next poem is that a thread in this book are a series of poems to the ancient haiku poets Basho, Busan, and Issa, who I attempted to imagine as companions. Basho said, "Aloneness is the color of a poem," and I sense this image nuanced in my poem. Here is an epistle, a letter poem for Basho, who I think of as my first ancestor in poetry. Dear Basho, thank you for sending your new poems. I have a question, but first I want to tell you I traveled north by bus the other day to watch the Pueblo dancers, and there was a man on a high pole. He had a dead lamb with him, whose neck had been slit. The pole was 100 feet in the air, and he leapt and twirled on a small platform, which wobbled with his movements. You would have liked to have seen his body covered in sweat, shimmering in the sun like 1,000 yellow leaves. That night, I dreamt I was in a park of tall, leafy trees in various shades of autumn. I had a baby boy in a backpack slung from my shoulders, when out of nowhere appeared an enormous snake, and in one wide bite it ate the baby off my back. I woke with the morning light, sweat pooling in the hollow between my collarbones. Basho, what is this world if it is not this uneasy faith, puddling and drying as we thrust ourselves toward the sky? You have been dead over 300 years, but I feel you, Basho, the length of your back, its weight across pine when you lie down, your knobby right hand, a stylus between your fingers. I feel the way you feel yourself, so many brown and silvering leaves, each atop or underneath another. The double negation in the title of my book, "Not into the blossoms and not into the air," which is a phrase from Larry Levis's poem, Threshold of the Oblivious Blossoming, from his last book, The Darkening Trapeze, is both a specification and an abstraction, which for me generates an image of the Zen concept of form and emptiness, in that all things are both empty and full, and that nothing tethers us to the earth, yet at the same time, everything does. Lewis's full line is desire rushed back into things, but not into the blossoms and not into the air. And so much of this book is about the desire to see the momentum, the vitality in things, to observe closely the world, understanding that as a human, I am not separate from anything, that in fact there is no natural world, there is simply the world, and everything is included. Another premise of the book is the fact of impermanence and the paradox of how we search for and perhaps discover some constancy in what often feels like a rug being pulled from under our feet. For me, the response to this is close observation, which grounds me and helps me to be really cognizant for my experiences. When I am paying attention to the fluctuations in the day, moment to moment, watching what other creatures are doing in their moments, it slows things down, and I gratefully realize the contentment of connection and intimacy. In this next poem, direct experience and imagination meet in a love poem where I initially ask myself, what do I really mean when I say, I love you? "14 Love Songs." Above a pond, I sit on a wooden bench and throw pebbles into the willows. A rush of sunlight and wind creates a path in a channel of water, dances between the melting ice and brown islands of bulrush. The resident osprey, its eyes the color of yellow grass, follows my tossing hand. Love is a diorama of inner life in an outer world. I look down and find a chunk of fossilized rock with an entire Paleozoic shell sticking out. I am not afraid of love, but terrified of how it is my steady guide. Once, when tired, I wandered off the trail and crawled under a tree to rest. I woke to a young brown bear licking my boot. Nothing had ever felt that good. When I say I love you, what I mean is I wouldn't leave you. Even if love is not love back, it doesn't go away, although it may become a black hole. Could this be what it's like for trees to lose the green from their leaves? At noon, the light shifts and the pond turns into a mosaic of opaque green ice. Orange carp rise in these cold, watery chambers to breathe at the surface. Always I am in love. Always I am in love. Face to face with the sun. Face to face with the moon. This next poem pays tribute to Dogen, honoring his sagacity, and it takes its title from his Mountains and Water Sutra. Sorry, it's a lot of paper shuffling around here. Mountains hidden in mountains. Always my right side tugging me on, my right eye weeping, the furious liver shouting. Always a rising, a mountain inside a mountain. Always an uproar above the mountain. The full moon pulling everything through. Always the vacancy. I promised to be naked, to walk on my knees up the mountain. And if the mountain doubts me, I promise to take more off. Someone asked Bodhidharma, "What is Buddha?" And he replied, "Your thoughts and feelings." I ask, "What is poetry?" the emotion and observation of human consciousness transcribed into language. The next poem is a longer narrative poem about my grandparents and the death of my grandmother from cancer. There is no surprise for the writer if there is no surprise for the writer if there is no surprise for the reader. It was a while after this poem was completed that I discovered the presence of a koan. A student asked, when times of great difficulty visit us, how should I greet them? The teacher said, welcome. A student asked, this is so pertinent for now, a student asked, when times of great difficulty visit us, how should I greet them? The teacher said, welcome. And that's the title of my poem. When I get to the hospital, I see that someone has sent my grandmother a big bouquet of pink roses, and the card reads, welcome. Nana laughs and sticks the card on her morphine pump. She will only eat coffee ice cream with caramel sauce from Baskin & Robbins, which I run out to get for her from the shop on 66 and First. While she eats, she tells me about her grandmother, Bertha Lauber, who was such a fanatic about dust that she stuffed tissues in the keyholes before leaving her beach house at the end of the summer. She also wrapped the phones in newspaper, and it had to be the issue from that morning, as it was the cleanest. After 4 days of not moving her bowels, Nana moves her bowels, and everyone is very pleased. I tell her they put a sign on the door. She moved her bowels. Nana laughs, and then my uncle comes in and asks what all the commotion is about. Nana says, go read the sign. They wheel her away for radiation. When she comes back, all she says for the rest of the day is drip it up, sip it up. Are you used to being around Jews? Nana wants to know. Okay, I'll tell the story of how I met my Jew. He was not supposed to be drinking gin. We were only 16. I had long dark hair all the way down my back, and my sister Patsy would braid it in twin strands and then coil it around my head, as was the fashion of that time. Your grandfather came up to me at a party. He was already very drunk, and he said, why do you have that rope around your head? Do you think it's a challah? Nana is laughing so hard she bumps her face into mine. We look up and see Pop standing in the door, shy to enter the room. He is dressed up in a brown tweed vest under his suit coat and a light blue silk scarf folded in his chest pocket. But there is mustard crusted on his lapel. His gray hair sticks straight up, and Nana says, oh, Bobby, oh, Bobby, oh, Bobby. When Nana leaves her room at the cancer center to go home, my uncle asks an attendant to donate the leftover cases of Ensure nutritional drink to other patients in the ward. While we are pulling away, we see the attendant putting the cases of Ensure in the trunk of his car. Nana starts to laugh uncontrollably, and the morphine drip dislodges from her arm, the liquid morphine leaking all over the front seat. She mops it up with a few tissues and squeezes the small amount of liquid onto her tongue. Nana is in her bed, the twin bed on the right, which is pushed next to Pop's bed, the twin bed on the left. They are made up, as they always are, with elegantly printed floral cotton sheets and the butter yellow monogrammed blanket covers with white lace trim. She stopped talking a few days ago and is flat on her back with her head propped up on 2 white pillows. Her face is ashen blue. Pop puts on a freshly pressed pair of pajamas and goes to sleep next to her. I tuck myself into the seam between the 2 beds, like I used to do when I was a child, and rest a hand on Nana's chest, which is cornflower blue, and rises and falls weakly. She is so thin, each rib looks like a finger trying to poke through her papery skin. I place her fingertips in my hair and can almost feel them flutter like butterflies against my scalp. I lay my head on the small hill of her collarbone and imagine her tickling my back the way she's done all my life with the smooth ends of her nails. I want to stay like this until she dies. I want to feel what happens to her body when her heartbeat stops. And then it does, and she dies, and her hands float up, and they graze my cheeks. So my grandparents were very young, because my parents were very young when they had me, and so I knew them for a long time. And this on my rakusu is this is an applique from a shirt from my grandmother, so it's very special to me. So anyway, speaking of rakusu, and I was thinking of the vows and how sometimes they can be very challenging. The next poem speaks to this, and it's another, and it involves another poetry ancestor, Issa. The title of the poem is one of Issa's haikus, and also the last section of the poem is another one of Issa's haikus, although the last line is mine. The poem is called, "All the time I pray to Buddha, I keep on killing mosquitoes." Issa, I killed 8 gophers this fall, held each cold body in my open palm, stroking the river-colored fur between their silent black eyes before dropping them into a plastic bag. Their little hands were cupped, as if in death they cradled one last thing, because nothing does not continually hold all of what remains, or all of what has been carried somewhere else. The tunnels these creatures dug in my yard, destroying even the hardiest plants, will soon be used by voles and rats and other gophers from other yards that will be trapped and killed by me. I met a man who hunts elk. He shot a large buck, and when he was beginning to dress it, just as he made his first cut with the blade through the buck's neck, this man opened his mouth to yawn. The neck of the elk exploded, and the cervical fluid burst from its spine, infecting the man with a parasite that nearly killed him. Issa, I cannot absolve myself, cannot clear impurities from my body. You said a bath when you're born, a bath when you die. How stupid, how extraordinary. Here is another love poem. It's called Electrical Storm. When the lights went out, so many things were happening, but all I wanted to do was write a poem about how good it felt to fill buckets with cold water from the gravity-fed pump in the orchard, to walk across the tall summer grass, feeling the hollow crush of deathlessness cushion the soles of my feet, and store the buckets under the porch for drinking and safekeeping. When the lights went out, the crickets strummed louder for mates, the stars shone brighter. A voice called out of the blackness that was exactly me. Life is just a thing that feels like something. When the lights went out, the canyon wren offered a feather to the night, and the bear sat in peace under the apple tree by the back door. It felt so good to be in the dark with nothing turning on and nothing turning off, to hear a voice that was exactly mine and everyone else's at the same time. If you don't do another thing, you've done enough. Most of my poems end up being love poems for New Mexico. The next poem is a poem for Busan. I've envisioned him in New Mexico, sitting in a place I often sit, and perhaps it will be familiar to you too as well, those of you who are from New Mexico. It's called Each Day Traveling. Hello, Busan. I found another dead snake on the road today and thought of you, the way you said, use commonplace to escape the commonplace. Your square-faced frame many canvases, the ashen leaves of cold days, one purple thistle poking through. You walked a long way with pebbles in your shoes, sat above a mountain pond, considering your reflection, until nothing remained. Here the foothills are full of coyotes, and in my room I am surrounded with the yelps of their longing. The senses flood, the sunken islands of brackish grass appear to float in the pond. The whole world is in me, an unrelenting grief that is each day traveling so quickly into the next. How closely you looked at things. Struck by a raindrop, snail closes up. And then, dear Busan, and then, you would have kissed me, I think, on all sides of my face. I neglected to mention that Busan was known not only for his haiku, but very well known for his paintings. And also this poem makes use of two of Busan's haikus as well. So let me see where I was, excuse me. I have two more poems for you tonight from the book, and then I'm going to read two short new poems. The next poem I'm going to read to you is from the last section of the book, which is titled, Here is a Pilgrim on a Waterless Shore. This is a sequenced poem with 8 different sections, so I'm going to just read one section from Here is a Pilgrim on a Waterless Shore. I'm going to read section 5. I woke early this morning to the screams of a terrified cat as it was being pulled apart by a pack of coyotes, howling with glee as they wolfed it down. The crickets, who had been up all night, were still rubbing their wings against each other, exploding with want. Later, on the nature hike, we are told that every part of the daylily is edible and handed a freshly pulled petal to eat. Some bees are territorial and nudge other bees away, but they don't fight. Some bees live in hives and work together, while others are solitary, wallpapering their nest with the petals of flowers. At the edge of the hummingbird feeder, which hangs from a thin crabapple branch, a praying mantis lies in wait just above the spout, attacks the next ruby-throated that comes to drink, wrapping its long front arms around the hummingbird's neck like 2 mini pythons. The bird whines like a puppy as the praying mantis takes bites out of the flesh from the side of its head. The mantis would have eaten the entire hummingbird alive as he batted his lime green wings futilely, or died of a heart attack. But the nature guide flicked the insect off the bird with his rolled-up hat. In the copper bird bath, tiny hoverflies are sucking the head of a drowned white moth. I bend down close, their shiny orange bodies almost to my lips. We call it sky, I say to them, but to itself it is an interminable beginning. And the last poem I'd like to read to you from this book is the last poem in the book. And It's very short, and it's embedded with one line from Walt Whitman, and also it has another koan in it. Refrain. Warm from the bed, from the goose down, I wake this morning from the depths of not refusing a long evening sleep, accompanied by Whitman, the curious sympathy one feels when feeling with the hand the naked meat of the body. Whitman's body, a refrain woven through the red thread of me, a hard freeze last night, and the light has changed to the winter light. So now I'm going to read two poems, two newer poems. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope this is okay. So what I understand about quantum foam is that empty space is very busy with a fuzzy, bubbly substance which fills the area between everything, like connective tissue, making nothing separate. So this poem is titled Quantum Foam, and I wrote this poem when I was in Florida. Quantum Foam. The air is close by the sea, and the glow from the pink moon drapes low over a tamarind tree. We hold hands, walk across a road rushing with traffic to an abandoned building site on the bay, look out across the dark marina. Sea cows sleep by the side of a splintered dock, a cluster of them under the shallow water, their wide backs covered in algae like mounds of bleached coral. Every few minutes, one floats up for air, then drifts back down to the bottom without fully waking. They do this for hours, and for a while we tried to match our breath to theirs and with each other's. In the morning, sitting in the garden beneath thatch palms, we drink black coffee from white ceramic cups. Lizards killed by feral cats are scattered on the footpath. I sweep them into a pile with the ones from the night before. Waves of heat rise from the asphalt, and we sense a transparent gray fuzz lightly covering everything, as if there were no such thing as empty space, that even a jar void of substance holds emptiness as if it were full. And the last poem I'd like to read for you tonight is an Ars Poetica. What is an Ars Poetica? In a nutshell, it's a poem about poetry, a poem that explains the art of poetry. To me, it's a love poem for poetry. Ars Poetica with pine roots. Can I know what I am? I am a host for many. Do I know why I make these things? This morning the air smelled of pine roots, spreading their ballads into the earth. Expect there will be a sunrise over steaming mountains. Expect there will be no reason to empty what fills and fills, to spend whole days after whole days pushing words around on paper, to eat one bitter blackberry, then another from the same bush, and the eighth one is sweet. Each long exhale unwinds a confession, each foot slog into the far back woods, paradise. In her wonderful poem, Some People Like Poetry, Polish poet and Nobel laureate Wisława Szymborska says, "Poetry, but what is poetry anyway?" More than one rickety answer has tumbled since that first question was raised. But I just keep on not knowing, and I cling to that. like a redemptive handrail. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here tonight.